I'm going to share with you my favorite podcasts. Of course, I love my own podcast, the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help people have innovative ideas to start, grow, and scale private practices. So this is for people that have a counseling private practice, massage therapy, chiropractors, attorneys, all sorts of people with a private practice, maybe coaching, things like that. All right, so I'm just going to go through what's on my phone. So the one that I listen to probably the most is the NPR News Now. And so at the top of every hour, those 5 minutes of quick news that are happening, I love that because if I miss the news or I miss that top of the hour news, I can just quickly have that. Now for a while, I didn't have it that only the most recent episode was in there, and so they just kept piling up. And so make sure you have your settings be just the most recent if you have one that's going to be giving you an hourly podcast. The next one that I'm really into, it's more of kind of a life podcast and kind of thinking about bigger things. It's Rob Bell's The Robcast. And so the Robcast covers issues of spirituality, of the Bible, of Buddhism, of how to be here, all sorts of really interesting guests. He recently had a guest on that she rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. So just interesting things. But what's interesting is, in contrast to that, I love Sam Harris's podcast. Sam Harris's podcast is called Waking Up with Sam Harris. Sam covers so much on science, agnosticism, atheism, how to live a life outside of the spiritual, but that is spiritual, without necessarily looking to a deity. And so it's great because I kind of have this internal debate between Rob Bell and Sam Harris that's going on each day. Another podcast that my daughters and I are really enjoying is All of Your Beeswax, and this is with Pat Flynn and his son Keone. And All of Your Beeswax, it's talking about business type things, but from a kid's perspective. And so Pat and Keone have these discussions that are really interesting. Pat also has the Smart Passive Income podcast and the Ask Pat podcast. I think when you're just getting started in business, those are great, just kind of intro to business type podcasts. As well, if you're looking for other intro to business podcasts, Entrepreneur on Fire is an amazing podcast. That's John Lee Dumas. And also Chris Ducker's Youpreneur. Those are all great. Just if you're new to business, check out those podcasts. Another long form podcast that I'm really into is Christopher Lochhead's Legends and Losers podcast. So Christopher Lochhead, he's a 3-time CMO, New York Times bestseller with his book Play Bigger. And he has his recent book Niche Down. I can never say niche. Niche, however you say it. Niche Down. And so Christopher has this awesome podcast called Legends and Losers, brings on these amazing people. I've been fortunate enough to be on there once. Maybe I'm on the losers side. But that's a great podcast. Oh, one that I forgot that is a great podcast that kind of goes back in the Rob Bell, Sam Harris side is the Heart Wisdom with Jack Kornfield. So Jack Kornfield is a Buddhist philosopher and teacher. Great lessons on meditation, on just allowing yourself to just love who you are and love the world around you. So that's a very calming podcast for me. The Sounds Good podcast with Brendan Harvey. Brendan interviews people that are doing really good things in the world, things that just are exciting, that are nice, kind of fills up your heart a little bit. So I definitely recommend the Sounds Good podcast with Brendan Harvey. If we're going back to some of the business podcast essentials, I definitely say Story Brand podcast with Donald Miller. Donald Miller has such a great philosophy. The core of it is that you as a business leader, that you're not the one that people are looking to as the hero. Instead, really, you're the one that's the guide. So you're the Obi-Wan Kenobi, your customer is the Luke Skywalker. He walks through this philosophy and this framework through his Story Brand podcast. Also, he has a new book out. They also have the Story Brand workshops. I think they're once a month or so. A crazy podcast that when I just want a fun podcast, it's called Hello from the Magic Tavern. Hello from the Magic Tavern is a podcast that it's all about this guy who falls through a riff in the universe behind a Burger King in Chicago and falls into this magic land of Foon. And he has a talking badger and this wizard as his friends. And he's interviewing him about this magical land of Foon. And so it's sort of like a mockumentary kind of thing. It's super profane. So if you don't like swear words or naughtiness, then don't listen to it. But when I need just a mental break and to laugh about something that's just ridiculous, I'll do that. So let's see, what else do I have here? So Tony Robbins podcast. Tony Robbins is an amazing speaker. So many good interviews on there. Really love that podcast. Also, Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. What a great podcast. Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. Dax Shepard, he's an actor. He interviews all these people. And I have so much more appreciation for the craft of acting, but also how much of a deep thinker a lot of these people are. The Online Marketing Made Easy with Amy Porterfield podcast is another really good one. I would put Eventual Millionaire with Jamie Masters up there too. They're both great online learning women. They have such great philosophies and ways that they train you. I especially like Amy Porterfield. She has a couple that are on how to use webinars so that they convert. Really helpful. You'll want to take a bunch of notes for that one. For a while I was into the Joe Rogan Experience. They're just so long. They're like 3 hours that I felt like I had to really commit to those. But every once in a while I'll jump into the Joe Rogan Experience when there's one that pops up that looks interesting for me. Lastly, the TED Radio Hour. I gotta throw that in there. Some of the greatest thinkers of our time going deeper beyond their TED Talks. So I would love in the comments to hear from you, what are your favorite podcasts? What podcasts did I miss? I covered a lot that are about business. I covered a bunch about life, some that are just plain funny. What are your favorite podcasts? Put them down below in the comments. And thank you so much for listening to this and watching this series all about podcasting. If you want more podcasting tips, if you want more marketing tips for your private practice, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe. That button's going to be somewhere in this range. Subscribe to this channel, and we're going to be doing tons more.